Welcome to the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show. I'm your host, Richard Wray. My mission is to help entrepreneurs understand AI and use it to their advantage. Join me today where we dig deep with our guests and get you the best concepts and strategies. Today's special guest is Brad Kasell. Brad Kasell is a principal technology strategist for Domo APAC. He has over 27 years experience in software engineering, management consulting, sales, digital strategy, and data protection. Prior to joining Domo, he has held roles at multinationals including Deloitte Digital, PwC, Microsoft, and Salesforce in Australia and the United States. Today, we're talking about unlocking AI's potential in business. Is it a golden opportunity or an ethical hotspot? Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Richard. Really happy to be here.
Great to have you here. And as I always like to ask my guests, where in the world are you?
Thank you, Richard. I'm actually I'm living in Melbourne at the moment. You'll pick up from my accent. I'm an American, but I've been in Australia for a long time, Sydney and Melbourne, and I'm certainly enjoying it here.
Fantastic. Fantastic indeed. Okay. So, Brad, we barely scratched the surface of what you do and your history. Can you tell a little bit more to us about it and how you've come to AI?
I guess there's three aspects to it. First is, as you touched on, over the years I've worked for many of the large traditional kind of enterprise software companies, whether it's Microsoft or IBM or
Hmm.
Oracle, usual suspects. And I think that about that is my data management phase. And then parallel to that, or kind of interwoven with that, I've been involved in management consulting in different
Hmm.
elements. So at places like Deloitte and PwC, and I was at McKinsey for a while. And
Hmm.
I kind of see that as the data consumption aspect. It's all about creating insights and using data for business impact and all that kind of thing. So those are what I think is the two primary coins. I guess the third element that I was kind of hinting at was I, AI in itself. I remember back, and this is going back many decades. I went to university in Sydney at UTS,
Hmm.
and my final thesis at the time was an AI related topic. It was about using AI to control electricity substations, which
Okay.
and I think back, and that was forgive me, but that was probably 30 years ago. And so for me, it's interesting journey that where AI's come, and it's certainly the hottest topic on the planet right now. But I feel like it's been around forever.
Well, that's really interesting because that is something that I come across on a regular basis when I talk to my guests. They state, yeah, AI has been with us for a long time, and it's only because it's got the zeitgeist,
Yep.
with it right now. So, my question to you is, how do you think the media is portraying it? Because obviously, it seems to be that hot topic for everybody.
Yeah, I think on one hand, it's a topic that most people, whether they interpret it correctly or not, will have an
Mhm.
opinion about it. Oh, AI, artificial intelligence, it can range anywhere from, the robots are about to take over our jobs, or it's the end
Yeah.
of humanity, or it's as mundane as, we're big data or machine learning. So depending on your perspective, it's something that can appeal to everyone, including the layperson.
Mhm.
I think as well, the media being what it is looking for the next big thing. A few years
Mhm.
ago, you'll certainly well remember how big crypto was. Crypto
Yes.
was going to destroy the financial industries and really disrupt everything. Hasn't really panned out that way, but it was certainly a huge topic at the time. So I think AI is in the mix of it's accessible to everyone, but it's the technology's also evolved at a kind of a inflection point.
Mhm.
So I think it's got a mixture of elements that just make it really interesting.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you probably agree with, but I'd really appreciate your opinion, the whole point of people hearing about AI and just instantly jumping to the negative, and probably the media's got a lot to do with that as well.
Oh no, it's easy. Because it's not so much, or people will jump around the negative on everything, whether it's electric cars or climate change, or
Mhm.
you name it. Everyone wants to have an argument about everything. But I think, again, because we've tagged it as artificial intelligence, it's almost like it draws comparison to human beings. So
Mhm.
it's an attack on the superiority of the human mind, so to speak. And I think that's something that everyone is going to defend that to some level or another.
Yeah, I agree with you. So, the intro today covered two sides of a coin. The opportunity and the potential ethical hotspot. Let's start with the opportunity. What do you see there?
So I think I think just to kind of in leading into that, I think it's probably both, and I
Mhm,
guess that's the point of we'll discuss both sides of that argument. But in terms of the opportunity, it's like I said, I think the technology has come to a bit of an inflection point where it's accessible to everyone. Before, it was accessible to data scientists, and
mhm,
like I said, it was typically a big data argument, and that had very specific applications and involved a lot of machine learning and a lot of manipulation of data behind the scenes, and involved specialized skills around data science. And so, while people might have seen it in popular culture, they didn't had no idea what it meant. It was a behind the scenes
mhm.
technology, and you might see it in very specific applications in in financial services, or say in health, or other industries. But it was invisible to most people. Now, so what I think has happened now, that say with it's really the release of Chat GPT. I'm sure this has come up to you a million times in conversation with everyone, but that was a defining moment when
Clearly, yeah.
clearly everybody from a student to anybody at all can go to chat gpt, interact with the technology in a very convincing way. And I think that's kind of something worth unpacking a little bit.
Mhm,
Um, and they could use it and get tangible benefits, whether it's just speed of doing something, access to different arguments, all kinds of it makes it. I'm trying to think what's the right way to phrase it, but it produces very practical output. It's things that people can actually take and use in their everyday lives that they couldn't do before. So, I think more broadly, everyone has access to a new capability, and so that's what's captured their imagination.
and it's very exciting, but there's obviously the 2 sides of the AI coin itself, which is that we've been really talking about with GPT, the generative side
Yeah,
of AI, where you've clearly worked a lot in the analytical side of
yeah,
AI. So before we go into the generative side a little bit, in your experience, how beneficial has the analytical side been?
yeah. I think it's again, it's one of the things that I get concerned about. I'm not concerned about, but I'm focused on with AI
Mhm,
is the business application. What are the problems that we're actually trying to solve? And I think there's been a lot of work done originally in let's have a look at the data and it will tell us what problems it finds.
mhm,
And yeah, I think I can appreciate elements of that, but I think it's in a lot of ways it's been solutions looking for problems.
mhm.
And I think we're trying to coming out of that now, and I think that the use cases are becoming clearer. But I think historically that's been the challenge with analytical AI. It's like we've got all this data. Surely there must be something interesting here that we can find out. So a lot of kind of querying the data in the hopes of finding something um, unknown.
It's a classic big data engineers would go in and try and work with this, and now big data is almost forgotten in some ways, and it's all about AI.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because poor old machine learning and, and stuff like that. It's like where does that sit these days? It's what's funny is that it hasn't gone away. It's absolutely earned its right place at the table, but it's
Yeah.
been kind of overshadowed by the more popular, whether they're buzzwords or whether they're just public facing tools. But that's where everyone's focus is right now.
I almost have this vision in my head of big data saying, "Hey, I was doing this stuff before it was cool." Yeah, so it's that sort of tone to it, I think. But okay, so let's just look at some of the wider side of it, though. Obviously, lots of opportunity, AI, especially in the generative side.
Yep.
We look at Midjourney, we look at ChatGPT again, and Bard and similar tools.
Yep.
It's been very powerful, but there's been some pitfalls. So, ChatGPT hallucinating,
Yep.
and I think a few people have fallen foul of that. But let's get into the ethical side. You've got some strong opinions there. Tell us about those.
Yeah, the ethical side is is kind of where the rubber hits the road.
Mhm,
If you think about the applications of it, and again, it on at first glance, it's well, what business problems can we solve?
yeah.
How can we optimize a certain business process, or we can improve lending, or we can improve all these things? And it's very tempting. It's very seductive because like I was kind of alluding to earlier, the way that some of the AI tools work today, they're very convincing. They're very prescriptive. It's like you ask a question and you get a very specific, confident answer This is, here
Mhm.
you go. Here's the answer to your problem. So I think, there's an element of just the first case is just simple overconfidence. People take those responses at face value and treat that as the definitive answer to any
So if
given
I could
problem.
just interrupt you
Yeah.
there, though,
Yeah.
is it they take it at face value, or is it that they're a little bit lazy in that they just think, "Hey, this is making my life so easy, I don't need to worry about it."
I think it's a bit of both.
Mhm,
On one hand, it's quick and easy. So great, I'll plug it into ChatGPT, I'll get an answer. It's fast, it's efficient, and there is definitely an efficiency play.
mhm.
I get it. I do some stuff around content creation, and it's fantastic. And it really does make a big difference in terms of
Yeah.
fundamental research and collecting ideas and kind of getting that base research done. So I think on one hand, efficiency unquestioned, but I think there's also this confidence element that it's still a bit of a mysterious technology, and
Mhm.
I'll unpack this in a moment.
Please, yeah.
But I think there is that level of the confidence, like ChatGPT, the responses that come through from AI are so well written, are so effectively communicated that it's better than what people could produce themselves. So it just in terms of the actual construction of the response. So people think, wow, this sounds very authoritative. And I'm happy to take this because it's better than what I could have come up with by myself. So there's certainly elements there as well. I think the other aspects that I was getting to is around things like explainability or traceability. And those are
Mhm,
very uncomfortable topics because if you take a solution at face value, in business today, usually you're putting it's still humans that have accountability
mhm.
for business processes. So at some level, someone is putting their reputation or their role or their authority on the line to say, okay, I'm accepting this as the right answer, and we're going to go ahead with it. And there's a litany of cases where things like explainability or things like traceability become incredibly important. On one hand, you see it in financial services.
Mhm.
So if you're doing mortgages or loans or any kind of financial transaction, how you have to have some level of traceability there. Why was I denied a loan, whereas Richard, who's in the same economic
Mhm.
circumstances as me, approved? There's so at the basic level, it's just bias. But when there's consequences attached to it, the one that I love, it's the best example that I've heard, is in the US. They were looking at it for automatic sentencing of criminals.
The compass system.
Yeah, and what a beautiful. I mean, when you think about that, it couldn't be a better example of the potential pitfalls,
Mhm.
where it's very efficient. It theoretically objective. I'm going to sentence criminals based on all these various factors. Saves a lot of time. It's wonderful. But when someone's life or livelihood or any kind of really fundamental human rights are on the line, you better be able to explain it. And if you can't, that really eats at the whole core of the legal system. So I think
No,
that sorry, go ahead.
no,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I mean,
Yeah.
with that particular, system, one example that I came across was there was a court case where, a black offender got a longer sentence, but it was the judge that gave them the longer sentence because of the advice from Compass.
Yeah.
Now my big worry about that is, will the judge now will the judge's verdict reinforce the future uses
Yeah.
of or the future behavior of Compass? So we've created this almost feedback loop, and then the next judge looks at what's happened, and Compass makes this recommendation, and on and on and on till it's just crazy.
It is crazy, and I think that raises a very interesting point because one of the challenges that we're observing now with the first wave of these modern AI tools is that the data that we've had all along has been inherently biased.
Mhm.
We haven't realized it until now, but oh, gee, willikers, there you have a have a disparity in sentencing that's
Yeah.
based on cultural biases, whether it's racial, or whatever it might be,
Mhm.
demographics, and all of a sudden those are now being brought to light. So, oh, our data is fundamentally flawed. And then the second one that you raised, quite rightly, is as we evolve on that and as we generate more data or we act on that data, are we now diluting the data pool? Are we skewing it in a different direction? It's really hard to know. As the data kind of transitions through this learning phase,
Hmm.
what are we doing to it? Are we making it better or worse? I mean, you
Interesting.
would have seen in the press over the last month or so where, an argument that ChatGPT's accuracy levels have dropped from,
Yeah.
90% to 5%, or, I'm exaggerating,
Yeah.
but there's a big discussion around what's happening to our data.
And this has been very interesting. We've sort of made ChatGPT dumber by responding to it and kind of negatively training it. But one of the changes that I've seen, which I'd love your opinion on,
Yeah.
is there was the recent Tesla demo with the self-driving car.
Yep.
And one of the big changes in how the self-driving car was working on this occasion was, as a simple example, rather than it being trained on this is a stop sign, you must stop at this, it was just fed video of good driving, and then it had to work out, oh, there's a stop sign there, or there's a crossing here, and without any sort of additional information, it worked out what was good. Now that is a real black box when it comes to why it's making decisions, which speaks, I think, to your accountability and
Yeah.
your traceability aspect. When we have the black box, who's responsible then? Who actually carries the can at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's a real problem, and I think it's interesting because on one hand, that shows more sophistication and more nuance in how to
Mhm.
leverage the data correctly, and that's brilliant. Like, okay, we're going away from raw data, and now we're modeling it based on behaviors and scenarios, and that's really quite sophisticated. And I think, yep, good on them, because
Very impressive.
that's a really clever thing to be doing. But at the other end of it, like I said, whether it's in business or just in real life, at some level, at least the way society works today, is that someone has responsibility for whatever happens. You might be the CEO, you
Mhm.
might be a parent, you could be anywhere in between. And if you're relying on information from these systems, it's not, if something goes wrong, someone's still looking for a human scapegoat. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. So that's probably the stickiest point. Like, that's not going to
Yeah.
change. So how do we resolve that with the technology? Um,
Yeah, well, you work with some very, very big names, and your advice has been probably listened to by a lot of CEOs over the years. I would have to say that with the way that AI is going, the responsibility landing on the CEO's desk, especially when we have the black boxes of AI,
yeah.
is just going to increase. So, if you were speaking to a CEO who is trying to implement an AI strategy, what would you be saying to them at this point?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what I'd be saying to them, but what I think they're going to do in fairly short order, because it's only going to take one or two major test cases
Mhm.
that come up, whether someone gets killed or there's huge financial ramifications. And you see this a little bit already, where, within an industry, let's say finance,
Yeah.
there's some transaction, something happens that costs the company, $1 billion or $10 billion, and then all of a sudden we're going to see a massive pendulum swing back the other way. Is that this technology is too dangerous? It's not worth the improvements in efficiencies or the improvements in, creativity. It's like the risks are too high. Well, ever we have a corporate system that says I'm the CEO and I'm ultimately responsible for everything my business does, I need traceability.
Mhm.
I need to be able to defend myself. So I think what'll happen is, for organizations, especially as they go into kind of enterprise AI and having these types of conversations, I think there will be a much tighter push around governance or some controls, whether we call it explainability or whether it's just you know that those types of concepts are
Mhm.
going to be, front and center. They're going to be on the board agenda. They're going to be really important.
So, do you think there's going to be a backlash against AI at the moment? There's always the murmurings of people that know very little about AI, or if anything at all, going, "Oh, it's going to take my job." But do you think there's going to be a real backlash against people using it?
I think there'll be two things. One, I think there'll be a consolidation. So I think
Mhm.
there'll be, right now there's a million companies pouring into the space, and
Yeah.
you've got Google and Microsoft and OpenAI and everybody just piling, and things are happening really quickly.
Mhm.
And that can't last forever because
No.
you see it already. People are like, oh, gee, it costs a lot
Oh,
of
it's the
money to
dot-com
invest in
bubble
this.
on fast forward, isn't it? I mean, it's the
Yeah,
same story as last time.
yeah. So I think on one hand there'll be a consolidation on the product side, and then I
Mhm.
think on the other side there will be a risk reassessment. Like, are we seeing the benefits that we thought we would?
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be, I think it'll be unfair to begin with, because people will jump to that quite quickly. Oh, we thought AI was going to transform our business, and it hasn't yet. It's been a week. What's happening? Why haven't we seen our the industry transformed yet? So they'll be like, well, and I think it'll settle down to, you know, there'll be role for AI to play, but it's not going to be
Mhm.
the the transformative, industry defining, world changer that perhaps everyone thinks it's going to be.
Interesting. You briefly mentioned the idea of some sort of regulation, and my question to you is, is there a place for some form of government regulation when it comes to AI in any form, or because this is such a global entity or experience, is it irrelevant?
It's a good point, and it's interesting because one of the things that I've been doing lately, which was super interesting, was I was involved with RMIT. The federal government issued a discussion paper recently around responsible AI, and
Mhm.
it's trying to address this very question. It's like the technology is moving really quickly. Two things: what should government's role be, and can government even play a role based on like things like speed and lag and kind of just the process. And then if they were to do anything, what should they do? What's the appropriate response? You've seen in the press as well, people saying, let's put things on pause, let's put the technology on hold, and you can't do
You
that. I
can't do
mean,
that. It's just not going to work, is it?
yeah, the genie's out of the bottle.
Mm.
And the question is, well, what does that mean? And yeah, and also I think one of the things about the government response is, can you sometimes the pace or that lag is actually smart. You let the hype die down a little bit and see what's really going to stick. And I think, like we said before, it's probably not going to be as transformative and world changing as we think it is. So if government rushes in too quickly, they're solving problems that might well solve themselves.
Interesting. So, do you think we're at the peak of the hype cycle, or do you think we've still got a way to go?
Um, that's a really good question. Personally, I'm sick of, I'm kind of a little bit past the peak, because I think it's something that comes up all the time, and
Yeah.
everyone's like, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever." But on the other side of that, I'll give you an example. My son's at university right now, and I'm watching the way he's adopting AI and others just as a natural input to their everyday lives.
Yes.
And I think, I don't want to underestimate this. I think, there's a big difference between enterprise AI and, let's say, AI for the rest of us.
Mhm.
And I think, it will become very quickly just a kind of a table stakes. I mean, the simple example, and this is kind of trivial, but if you go back to Google now, you're doing, say, I'm researching a story, I'm trying to
Yeah.
research a topic. If I go back to Google now and I get 200,000 links to topics that might be relevant to me, or I get a nicely summarized paragraph on the top 10 factors influencing manufacturing in India, I know which one is just simply better.
Yeah.
And so I think, at the grassroots level, it'll find a place, and it's already finding a place very quickly. I think on the big end of town, it's going to take a lot longer and a lot more risk involved. So it's kind of both.
Have you seen any examples at the enterprise level where they have started to implement AI and you've just gone, oh, no, 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 that's not the way to do it. It's really kind of sent shivers up your spine.
I don't know about shivers up my spine or shivers up anybody's spine, because despite everyone kind of talking about how this is the greatest thing ever, I think most organizations are looking at it, have done a lot of pilots, they've done a lot of trials, they've done a
Mhm.
lot of very narrow use cases. I don't think, and to some degree, it's a question of timing, because this all, in the enterprise space, this takes time.
Yes.
because they've got all traditional systems, they got all the complexity, they've got governance, they've got
They
all
never
kinds of
move
things.
quickly.
No, and they can't. It's just because by the nature of the beast. And then there is also this emerging thing. Well, there are risks here at play, and at some point it gets on the attention of the lawyers and others, and like,
Mhm.
hey, we love you and we're all for being competitive and disrupting the industry, but be aware that there's pros and cons. So I think what's really good is that organizations now have a better nuanced view of what's good and bad. It's
Mhm.
not just hey, this is great, let's forget about everything else. It's like, oh, this is great. Now the question is more around how do we use this and why are we using it, which is far more important.
I would agree with you there. So, for everybody that's listening today, whether they're a CEO or a solopreneur, what's that one piece of advice you would want them to take away from today that they can move forward with?
I think for me, it's the same old question that it's always been. I mean, I was joking before about AI being around forever. It's around know your business. What are you trying to do? If you're a financial services company, your use of AI is going to be completely different than if you're in healthcare and you're trying to
Mhm.
cure cancer. So I think AI by itself is a technology, and even within the technology, it's a wide span of different capabilities. So I think the first thing you need to think now is what are you doing? What's your business and why are you
Yes,
doing it? And then think that at that point, if you can answer that question, then how AI can help you will be a lot easier to understand.
really great advice there. Brad, where can people find you? And do you have any exciting new projects that people should know about?
Thank you, Richard. So yeah, so Domo itself is like I said, I live in Melbourne. The Domo is a US based software company as we know, in the kind of data and analytics space. We do have a team in Australia. There's about 50 or so of us here, based across Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane as well. We operate out of the Asia Pacific team. Our website is domo.com, as you'd expect. And I think in terms of interest for us, where we're at with AI, we've been working with that data for forever, for a long time, in terms of data management, data governance, as it feeds into your traditional analytics. Like a lot of organizations, we then branched into AI and ML. And now we've recently, if you want to go to website domo.ai, it looks at what we're doing in terms of AI. And that's more
Mhm.
around, it's interesting take that we've had. It's more around being flexible. We
Okay.
have what we call model management. So you can pull in any of the AI models. You can pull in Bard, you can pull in ChatGPT, OpenAI,
Mhm.
all of the models. It's more of an interface to say, we know there's going to be a proliferation of different AI models, and we want you to be able to use any of them. So it's more of a flexibility approach. And then likewise, we have a service layer that we're calling it, but it's really around maybe an automated way to pull all of those models into your apps, into your reports, into your dashboards, and say, look, if this is a great capability, now let's just make it plugged in. It's integrated with everything, so you can use it when you want it, and you don't have to think too hard about it. It just becomes another capability. So lots going on in that space, and domo.ai is where you can find out about it.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like it's going to solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. I've heard the request for just something like that on more than one occasion. So, yeah, that sounds great. Brad, thanks for a really interesting conversation today.
Thank you, Richard. Really enjoyed it. It's a fascinating topic, and I think we've got a long way to go.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. Well, that's a wrap on another awesome guest episode for the Evolvepreneur AI Advantage Show. Just before you go, if you'd like this episode, we would be very grateful for a 5-star review. Please also consider recommending the show to a friend or two. Make sure you subscribe for future episodes at aiadvantage.show right now. Until next time, I'm Richard Wray, and if you're an entrepreneur, get the AI advantage today.